is actually for all men. I think men are in crisis, actually, in this country. I think that plays out different ways. And not all men are in crisis, of course. And not all men are just at home listening to Joe Rogan, being angry or being recruited to fascism. Some just need therapy, like we all do. I go to therapy. That's great. But I think we need to have a real conversation about that rather than allowing this kind of drift toward this faux masculinity that we see Donald Trump evincing.
And what I see is...
So we have now reached this point in the election where Democrats are claiming that if you're a man that's not voting for Kamala Harris, it must be because you're going through some type of mental crisis. It must be because you're an angry incel obsessed with fascism that watches too much Joe Rogan. Meanwhile, if you're a grown man that puts on lipstick, does his nails, puts on high heels, calls yourself Shirley, and wants to be referred to as a them-they, while dressing up as a unicorn, that's normal, that's stunning, that's brave. But if you vote for Donald Trump and you don't want to vote for Kamala, oh, there must be some type of mental crisis. And this is so frustrating for me because, obviously, we have a mental health epidemic going on in this country and the world overall. But the problem is not people who are voting for Donald Trump. And if you want me to be completely honest with you all, the majority of the problem is with people who are voting for Kamala Harris. People who have just abandoned any sense of reality. And if you're a leftist, if you're a Democrat, and if you want to throw yourself into the mud and start flinging mud and join the political conversation, don't bring up mental health when arguing about Trump supporters or conservatives or people who just don't like Kamala Harris. Don't bring up mental health because it's so easy to dunk on you all. Oh, there's a mental health crisis because people are watching Joe Rogan and men are acting like men. Oh, but there's no mental health crisis with people chopping parts of their bodies off and pretending like they're a different gender. Kind of weird, right? But yeah, this is just one of the many copes that is going on right now because despite, how hard they've been trying, the white guys for Kamala Harris and stuff like that, it's not landing. Kamala Harris is just not landing with most male voters. And I don't even see why she's landing with most female voters. But this is where we're at, where they're going to gaslight people and say, oh, you got to be crazy. And it's really funny when you really think about it. But let's go ahead and roll this clip. Let's listen to a little more cope, and then I'll be right back with more.
And on what's on the ballot is the definition of masculinity going forward. Is it toxic masculinity, or is it a different kind of masculinity?
Right.
This table is driven by women, and it's frightening. What also leads me to is a piece in the Times today on Elon Musk, speaking of bros, and you are electing Elon Musk if you are also electing Donald Trump. Donald Trump's campaign has raised $300 million. Elon Musk's campaign, his super PAC is going to raise $150 million. Donald Trump said $500 million. You're getting this guy.
Oh, yeah.
You're getting the richest guy in the world who controls a major social media platform. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
Trump and Elon Musk together, and they talk about, everybody should read this piece in the Times. It's Maggie, it's Jonathan Swan, a whole bunch of people wrote it, and it talks about meeting with these billionaires. It has this sinister undertone to it.
Oh, yeah.
So there is masculinity, and the definition of masculinity is on the ballot. As far as your question about breaking through, I like what she did when she was talking about John McCain and giving his thumbs up, because she was very real. Like, she's got to let it rip a little bit.
Yeah,
That's
let it rip.
let it rip. Going back to the conversation of masculinity.
Kamala be Kamala.
Yeah.
Well,
not inject testosterone necessarily, but inject some WTF kind of attitude, if you will.
Don't worry, ladies. I can assure you that no real man, there's not a single real man in existence that is concerned or afraid of toxic masculinity. Okay? And whenever I hear a man use the phrase toxic masculinity, I go ahead and tune them out, because you're not a man at all. You need to drop your nuts or shut the fuck up. Because I don't know if you're trying to get laid by these women or what, But men who say stuff like this, ladies, you can't trust them. Okay? They themselves are toxic. They don't have toxic masculinity. Most of them aren't masculine at all. But this is really some slimy stuff that some guys will use to try to fit in certain groups or to get around certain women. And more often than not, people who preach about stuff like this are actually the real monsters. Most of them aren't married. Most of them don't have kids. Most of them don't actually respect women. And toxic masculinity these days, basically what it means is you just being a man. You know what I mean? Like, how can you say, oh, you don't want to vote for Kamala Harris? That's toxic masculinity. Or maybe it's just because the last 4 years have been complete shit. You know, maybe that's why. Maybe it has nothing to do with masculinity or femininity. Maybe it's just because the last 4 years have freaking sucked. Maybe that's why we don't want to vote for Kamala. Maybe because, unlike you retards, when we turn on the TV and we hear Kamala Harris cackle and laugh, we're not impressed by it. You know what I mean? But no, it's got to be, it's toxic masculinity. And it's just like Kamala Harris's husband, who's been out here preaching about toxic masculinity and things like that. But look at the skeletons that recently came out of his closet about him beating up his girlfriends, constantly putting his hands on women, being a real freaking nuisance to all of the women in his life. What about that? You know what I mean? If we're going to talk about toxic masculinity and about how men are so big and bad and they're in a crisis, let's talk about the crisis that Kamala's husband went through when he knocked up the nanny, cheated on his wife, and then, has been accused of putting his hands on multiple women. What about that? How's that for toxic masculinity? Let's just dodge that conversation though, right? So like I said, usually those who preach the loudest, they're usually guilty of the things that they preach about. So I know that guy's sitting there acting like he's so afraid of, oh man, this could be the definition of masculinity moving forward. He's a freaking creep. I wonder what type of skeletons he has in his closet. Obviously a lot. That's why he's sitting on a CNN panel pretending to be a male feminist who's so intimidated by Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Lord, oh man, these people are insufferable. But you let me know what you think about this, though, down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell. And as always, if you find yourself getting too worked up by all of this, remember, it's just political cinema.